Well, hey there. Welcome to the Pawpaw Chronicles and more with Jim. Well, as you all know, I like to shoot a lot of videos, and I really shoot more videos about the pawpaw than any other species of tree that I have here on the property. I have a number species of trees on the property. I don't share as much, but the pawpaw I share a lot of. Today I'm standing beside a tree and looking it over, and I'm very pleased with what I see. Earlier today I ate a persimmon, and the seed sac itself had the stringency in there, so I had to grab myself a beer to wash that bitterness out a little bit, and it works for me. With that being said, I want to ask a question of those who follow on the page or on the channel. Do you have a 4-year-old pawpaw tree? Is your 4-year-old pawpaw tree as big as this 4-year-old is? Well, it's a grafted tree, I will admit. But the rootstock itself was harvested from one of the trees that I have out in the front of my property in 2019, 4 years ago. And then in 2020, as most of you know, have followed me, it was grafted. And I did a number of grafts out here. My own personal, I guess you would call it, little pawpaw orchard. 50% of them are grafted root suckers such as this. Do you think you're going to have a 4-year-old pawpaw tree this big? I think not. I've done an awful lot of work with the pawpaw tree, and the one thing I've come to find, when utilizing the root sucker, it's something that the seedling can't stand against. I'm going to look it over and explain that to you here momentarily. Man, the tree is really looking good. Got a lot of flower sets within the tree. They're all over in the tree, which means it's ready to present itself as far as fruit bearing. It had flower sets this year, but that cold snap we had did a number, and I ended up with no fruit. This tree should have had fruit in it this year, but next year, oh man, I can't wait. I've been waiting for this for a while. As I said, this was a grafted root sucker. Wow. Not a seedling. The root sucker broke ground from the parent tree in 2019, and when it got to being about roughly around 18 inches tall, I harvested that root sucker. I had severed the root sucker from the parent tree. I let it set for a couple weeks to ensure that we didn't have dieback from the terminal bud, that being the very end of the run of the growth. And then I went ahead and dug it up and I transplanted it here. What made this tree grow so quickly? Well, I did a presentation down at the Pawpaw Festival talking about root suckers within the orchard, utilizing root suckers for the orchard. And this was one of the trees that I had presented the picture of. And the one thing I will say is I'm amazed at how well this tree did. The rootstock itself is 4 years old, but the scion wood was placed in there in 2020. So we're looking at 3 years of growth. I don't think you're going to get that out of a seedling. It's not going to grow like that. And one of the reasons being, as I explained, is I did a root ball scenario for this particular tree. By the way, once I cut it loose from the parent tree and it begins to live, it becomes an individual tree on its own. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when I put it into the root ball scenario, the mycorrhizas are still within that root ball connected to that root itself. The outer edges, the mycorrhizas, have probably died because exposure to the air. But that being said, once the tree was planted, the mycorrhizas are there within that root ball, feeding that tree continuously, and as it does it, the roots begin to slinker out away from the hole and start going into the topsoil that I have to offer here. And then what ends up happening is, as the root system is slinking outward, it's dragging the mycorrhizas along with it. The mycorrhizas are the key to gathering nutrients underneath the soil to feed this tree. And apparently there's a lot of mycorrhizas beneath the soil to feed this tree. Do you have a 4-year-old tree this big? It's kind of hard to say. I wouldn't think so. I've got a lot of pawpaws on my property. I have planted a lot of pawpaws on my property. And when it comes to age comparison, none of the seedlings come close to comparing to this. Now, I have one right there that was a seedling that I did some top work on, and some of the top work took, some of it didn't, and I allowed more green to produce on there to keep limbs alive that I can graft into next year to bring balance back to that tree. So I will show you that one, and I have another tree over that way that was grafted that I will show you. This right here is just strictly amazing to me. I'm extremely happy with what I see, and if you decide to try your hand at growing root suckers, I strongly suggest that you look into it, because it is a very good way to getting the results that I've gotten here. So I can't imagine a seedling being able to keep up with this pace of growth. The root sucker itself is able to offer up what energy that it needs to offer up for the scion to grow. And the scion, incidentally, comes from a much more mature tree. And that's the reason why it grew like it did. It needed that energy to grow, but the root sucker offered that energy for it to grow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pan the camera over to that tree, stand beside it, and then I'm going to pan the camera to that tree, stand beside it, and talk just a little bit more. Bear with me. That right there is a tree that I had top worked. And I'm going to have to revisit it again next year. The one thing that I will share with you about this tree, it was a seedling from 2016. So the rootstock that we're looking at in itself is a 7-year-old rootstock. The graft, which is most of it is in the top, is this year's graft. But the growth coming off came from the rootstock that I had explained earlier, and I'm going to revisit, and that's the reason why I allowed this to grow, because the main leader branches I want to survive. But 2016 rootstock. So we're looking at a 7-year-old tree. Not a bad looking tree. Very healthy looking tree, and I'm happy with what I see. Very, very healthy tree. I'm going to pan over to that one over there and talk just a little bit more, and then I'll be done with this video. It's just something that I wanted to share with you. The one that I was just at, right there. Once again, I ask you, do you have a 4-year-old tree? That's the age of this. The same scenario as that one over in that direction. 2019, it came out of the ground as a root sucker. I harvested and moved it here and grafted. The graft took place very, very low to the ground and due to a groundhog. But man, that thing's pushing 7.5 to 8 foot tall, which I'm going to have to top it. It's getting too tall. And that will offer up some scion wood. A 4-year-old tree. Hard to imagine that a 4-year-old tree will be that big. Just something that I wanted to share with you, and something for you to think about as far as root suckers and the usage of root suckers within the orchard. My name's Jim. Skeeters are bad. If you like what you see, subscribe. Any comments or questions that you may have, I welcome. Don't forget to click on that bell for any notifications. You all have a God bless day.